Here on this channel, we spend a lot of time trying different challenges and seeing different ways we can beat the Halo games. Whether it's doing runs where we don't shoot or runs where we can't even walk, we really like to look at Halo from a different perspective. And while we have a lot of fun doing those challenges, we've recently found it really interesting to look back at the Halo franchise and see how other players who have been playing Halo for just as long as we have attempted to play Halo in a different way. And with the release of Halo Reach, we kind of put our attention onto Halo Reach and discovered that people have beaten this game in about an hour and a half on legendary difficulty. And we followed speedrunners before in other games, and we've always found it interesting to say the least, but as we began to dive into Halo Reach speedrunning, it's been a very interesting trip to try to break down and understand, because these strategies behind running through a campaign like this is absolutely insane. And of course, huge shout out to Pedrogas and Wolfie. If it wasn't for them, we would not have been able to make this video. They were really helpful and kind enough to let us use their footage and attempt to break it down. Seriously, there's so many little intricate parts of their speedruns that it's very likely we missed a lot of the things they were doing just because it was so over our heads. So definitely go and check them out, support them on their streams, so that if you have questions of specifics as to how they did some of the things that they did, they'll probably be kind enough to answer your questions. And today we thought it'd be really interesting if we broke down how these Halo speedrunners were able to beat Halo Reach in an hour and a half. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Now for this video, we'll be alternating between footage from Wolfie, who had a 1:31:46 run through the entire campaign of Halo Reach in one sitting, mind you, and we'll also look at Pedrogas, who currently has the world record for a one-sitting Halo Reach legendary speedrun at 1:30:13, which is so crazy still to us. And when looking into this run, you can tell right away that these players completely break away from what a typical player would do in a regular playthrough. Starting things off on Winter Contingency, the main strategy on this level is to jump at the very beginning to keep momentum going, to try to cover as much ground as possible right away. Immediately you can see these players breaking away from what typically is done, and they essentially climb up these rocks, getting them over the hill quickly and begin to break out of the level. Essentially starting this level out, they're already utilizing a glitch found in the very beginning of the first level to do this really awesome barrier skip, getting ahead in the level. Now what's really interesting about not only this level but runs in Halo Reach is that there is a lot of randomness that can occur, and seasoned speedrunners like Wolfie and Pedrogas have to be able to adapt to whatever is going on in their run to best get the perfect time that they're looking for. In this case, after they do the barrier skip, they cut back into the level, which is used to despawn June out of the Falcon so that they can use a plasma pistol to hijack the Falcon. By doing this hijacking trick, they're able to skip a huge portion of the level, but before they can just fly further in the level, they actually break the game again by clipping the Falcon into a Spirit, which honestly just takes such pinpoint accuracy, precision in lining up the Falcon. It's so impressive to watch how they just line up the Falcon into the Spirit's flight path perfectly. From there, the game will break the barrier, letting them fly way up ahead and fly all the way to the end section of the level where they're able to clear out enemies. But then they go ahead and fly back behind the building outside of the map, triggering the next section of the level to load, which then allows them to run inside, skipping the whole section of the level that you normally have to go through, while also speeding along the whole firefight section, getting you all the way to the last section of this level in just about 5 minutes, which is absolutely insane. When in the inside dark section of this level, this is really interesting because this time around there aren't any obvious skips to get through this, and there's a lot of enemies. So despite trying to race against the clock, speedrunners have to use pinpoint accuracy and throw solid grenades, making sure that they're precise and do the damage that they need, while also utilizing the classic noob combo where you use a plasma pistol and then quickly switch to a ranged weapon to best take out the harder enemies like elites. Swordbase is up next, and this part is very intense because you have to clear every enemy to move forward in this level. In the early section, they time their grenades and make sure to make precision shots, and they really have to take time at the start of these levels because the enemies are on legendary difficulty. However, However, when getting to the outside section, the strategy here is to just move as quickly as possible, and they use ghosts to quickly drive to the objectives and jump out quickly, doing a cool jump to hit the first button, and then they rush to the second area to press the 2 buttons you have to press there quickly as well. Along the way, they pick up rocket launchers, which they will use on the hunters that are blocking the elevator. And this next part is really interesting because typically you spend a lot of time inside of Sword Base running up the stairs and making your way into the final section of the level. But if you have a concussion rifle with you, you can actually quickly use the gun to launch yourself up to the very top and skip the whole indoor section. And from there, utilizing the rocket launcher they already have along with the extra rocket launcher ammo that's laying around, they quickly take out the enemies in the area, and this level is completed as well. Going on to Nightfall next, it's really important that they run quick and kill stuff or they'll die pretty quickly here, so they have to be quick with what they're shooting at. Interestingly enough though, on this level, if you rush through and get to a forklift, you can actually skip a huge portion of this level by just jumping in a forklift and clipping through a door, which essentially puts you in the last area, which you can just run to the end of the level on. And this is kind of an iconic glitch here because the forklift is one of the best vehicles of all time, and of course Halo Reach once again showing that the forklift is the best as it's a required tool if you want to be able to rank in any type of speedrun in this game. And Tip of the Spear was up next. Now early on in this level things are really chaotic, so the strategy was to run alongside the ridge to avoid the crazy fuel rod gun turret that can completely demolish anything, and essentially they run past a lot of the enemies, skipping straight to the Warthog area. From there, the strategy is to drive forward and shoot down the big cannons by switching to the back of the Warthog from a distance and firing from pretty far away. There's parts on this level where they're going so fast that the voice lines actually start to overlap, which is really interesting. And when they get the opportunity to, they'll actually switch to a ghost, which makes them speed through the level even faster, and they're able to skip the whole bridge section by driving up the rock wall and carrying their momentum, which gets them behind the enemies so that they can easily move by. The section that has a bunch of stairs and platforms is really interesting to watch because they have to do some really cool jumps and parkour, which skip the usual route that's here and is just some pinpoint jumping, which is really cool to see. Then they take the Revenant and they drive it down the hill. We can see a pin perfect hijacking of the Wraith, which is used not only for defense but also to take out some extra enemies, which allows them to get picked up by the Falcon, which take them on to the next section of the level. Now upon landing, the typical strategy here is to skip the jetpacks that seem so cleverly placed there and just run forward up the rocks as best as they could, and then they use a truck to drive themselves perfectly to line up with the grav lift and get to the top of the tower as quickly as possible. Then we see a quick and efficient assassination on the elites before they even know what hits them, and this is so smooth and fast. It's a really clean thing to see, especially considering that we know this is legendary difficulty. Next, we're moving on to Long Night of Solace, and this level is one of the longest levels in the game. Now early on, the strategy here is to chain the jumps as best as they can to keep their momentum going like we saw them do earlier, and they really have to be careful about this drop pod elite that drops in right away, which essentially can make or break your run in this section of the level. Clearing him out though does give enough room where you can make your way straight into the flying section of this level. Now this part definitely takes a really long time, and being in the outer space part, knowing your level and having an idea of where the spawns are is super important. We noticed that they would almost pre-fire being prepared for where the enemies would spawn to best maximize how quickly they could move past this section. The indoor section has a lot more close quarter combat, similar to what we had seen at the end of the first level, and the major thing that helps in these runs is level familiarity here. It's very obvious that these players know these levels inside and out. They know where they can find weapons, how to take cover, and how many shots they're going to need going into each area. It seems like the noob combo is still a go-to strategy, and it works well here. A great example of level familiarity here definitely comes at the end of the level during the firefight, where essentially essentially knowing the spawns of where the enemies are going to be coming from can give you a really big leg up and quickly eliminate them, which takes out a threat that could cause you to have to reset to the last checkpoint. Next, we're moving on to Exodus, which really is a level where they just run as quickly as they can, and honestly, they don't even really sweat the brutes at times. There is a really awesome part though in this level where predicting where the enemies are going to be is crucial, because you have to throw a grenade perfectly to help kill the enemies, or essentially you're pretty much going to die here, and it's a crucial grenade throw. There is the section where you normally get jetpacks and you're with the group of ODSTs, but actually you can skip a huge portion of this section by using the railings underneath the main platform and doing some really awesome parkour and jetpack jumps. It honestly looks pretty tricky, but they do it perfectly here. Later, they line themselves up and use a rocket launcher to just wipe out a ton of guys, which definitely gives them some headroom not to get flanked in the later section before the Falcon comes to pick them up. And upon getting on the Falcon, this is another section where you have to shoot at the Banshees or you're going to get screwed on this section of the run. Then at the end section of the level, the objective is to hit several buttons on different weapons. There's a big threat with the Wraith, mostly being the machine gun turret guy, which can gun you down so quickly on legendary difficulty. There's also a part where you can use a rocket launcher to quickly kill a brute chieftain, and as they make their run for the final and last switch, they actually avoid a brute chieftain who's inside defending the switch by hitting the button through the outside of the window. But then we get to New Alexandria, and this level alone single-handedly can make or break anyone's speedrun. There's so many variables in this level, and Pedrogas actually told us that for this level to get a perfect best case scenario run, there's only a 0.0004 chance to get all of the random variables on this level perfectly. There could be a lot of situations where you don't get the mission objectives in the right order and you have to reset the level, or you can get less than good-ish scenarios and you have to really make up time later on. Also, it helps if you know where all of the objectives are by heart so you don't get lost like we always do whenever we try running this level. But ultimately, there's 12 different possible routes that you can go on, and to make this as simply explained as possible, you have to have the hospital as either your first or second objective. If you don't get it or you get it third in your objective, this can actually kill your entire run. Now, starting things off, the typical strategy here is to use the Falcon to fly where Banshees first appear and get them to aggro you just the right way where the player can leap out of the Falcon and land in the right spot to hijack a Banshee. From there, if you have the hospital first, you can fly your Banshee over to the hospital area, break the wings off just so you can get it inside, and then you have to navigate through the hallway. Some speedrunners will actually call in for an evac right when they get into the building, which is something that comes up later on. But with the Banshee inside, you're able to take out some of those enemies early on. From there, you have to get to the jammer at the back of the hospital area and take it out. But there is a really interesting despawn glitch that you can do here, where if you jump out of the Banshee at the right moment after the jammer explodes, it'll cause a glitch which will respawn players outside. From there, you can have a Falcon if the evac comes or a Falcon spawns there for you. Next place he had to go to was Club Herrera, you know, the section that has the epic, intense battle with the hunters that he's gonna have to face off against on Legendary. Nope, he just runs past all of them, hits the jammer, and then just bails out of the building. Hey, whatever works, right? He takes on a similar strategy going to the last jammer, which is in the Ivory Tower area, and does a Falcon trick flying below the building and flies into the upper section, skipping the whole opening area, and goes up the elevator, which is really helpful here because he can avoid most of the enemy spawns by going in this way, which works out well here. But next, we're moving on to the package, and with only 2 levels left, it's really interesting to see how they navigate through these last sections, especially because the package is a very, very time-consuming level. Early on, there's a lot of heavy enemies, so typically we see these speedrunners go a little bit slower to make sure they don't get wrecked early on. They push up to the tank eventually, though, and play the part of the level somewhat normally. There are actually a lot of bulky enemies up ahead, so using the tank is probably the best move here, especially since you can use the tank to quickly take out the towers as well. From there, you have to make your way back to Sword Base, and the strategy here is to hijack the Revenant and quickly use it as a splatter machine while trying to push forward to the building. Then there's some precise grenade throws that need to be done, and honestly, watching some of these perfect grenade bounces is so impressive to to see because it clears the hallway enemies really efficiently. However, this time around when getting to the actual sword-based part, it's a lot more tricky because there's a lot of enemies and the RNG with how enemies may or may not snipe you is really challenging here, and snipers can take you out instantly. The strategy for crossing this area is really interesting, where you actually switch from sprint to a hologram, drop a hologram really quickly and switch back to sprint and try to race across to see if you can clear this area without getting sniped. Sometimes we see this section take a couple of tries actually because of how random it can be, but it's faster, I guess, to just take the loss if you die, reset to checkpoint and try to pass it again rather than picking off the other snipers. From there, they make the push to the elevator room and enter the final firefight area. The main strategy here is to rush and get a jetpack to fly on top of the antenna, so hopefully you can get close enough to quickly hijack a Banshee. Then they go and fly to A, B, and C, getting all the turrets online, and essentially a bunch of phantoms start coming in at that moment. You shoot a few shots at the phantom to best damage it, and then land in a corner to shoot some more explosive weapons that you have off of your Banshee at the phantom instead. This seems to be a really decent strategy, switching in and out of the Banshee to best take out the phantoms and flying over to different key spots using this strategy to quickly clear this area, which usually takes a long time either way. Later in the level, when the Wraith is dropped, a main strategy is to go after the Wraith and do a quick switcheroo trick to hijack the Wraith, and then use the Wraith by shooting at an exact approximation as to where a phantom should be to help clear it out, even if it's across the map, just like that. Seriously, it's really fun watching these types of kills where it's so premeditated and predicted to where exactly the flight patterns would go, and it's just really fun to see here. And I guess there's definitely a really important part of the speedrun where you memorize the flight patterns so you can predict where these phantoms are going to go. Starting things off on Pillar of Autumn, the strategy is to jump off the cliff and use the rocks to keep momentum going and hit the right speed to quickly assassinate the elite easily, then utilize the mongoose to just fly through the next section of the level. Then after the driving part, doing some quick parkour to avoid some of the enemies and firefights along the way to get to the part where Carter oofs himself. And then after the cutscene, interestingly enough, utilizing a concussion rifle to push your way up the cliff wall will save a few seconds to turn the corner even quicker. When we get to the big open section, which is the boneyard area, the best strategy here is actually to avoid most of the enemies, and having a route to run through here is super helpful because the enemies here don't really mess around. Fortunately enough, you can skip the whole boneyard section by using a concussion rifle to get yourself up in the rafters, and it makes it much easier to bypass stuff here. And when you sprint through this section of the level, a good strategy is actually just to jump through the glass windows where the hunters typically spawn to skip that area. Now we get to this indoor section where enemies are a serious threat here, and essentially shield jackals can take you out. So typically big strategy is to take them out first and then hope that the sword elite doesn't kill you in the process. Now sometimes Emil will actually help you out and kill the elite, however sometimes he's trash and you have to kill him yourself. Now another interesting thing here is when you get to the end section, if you keep that concussion rifle with you, you can actually skip straight to the Mac cannon and use it for the firefight to take out the phantoms that drop enemies, which helps skipping this whole section really easily and speed things along a lot. And then of course using a needle rifle and sniping at the rest of the enemies definitely helps clear out the few extras needed before the Pelican will come in. After the Pelican takes Cortana and you have to make your way back up to the Mac gun, the best strategy here is to hurry back with that concussion launcher and leap into a hidey hole next to the stairs to pick off those major elites that will then move away, which gives you in a safe area so that when Keyes asks you to make your shot, you can make the shot just at the moment that's needed rather than taking damage from those phantoms that will absolutely destroy you. It's a really high energy level, and this was when we had Pedro Gas completely take the world record at the time with a 1:30:13 legendary world record, which is absolutely amazing. But also Wolfie was able to pull off a 1:31:46, which is also an incredible feat. Seriously, it's so interesting looking at how these players take these runs and complete these games in completely different ways. Now mind you, the Lone Wolf level isn't an official level in the speedrun, so it ends here even though Lone Wolf does exist as an extra level, but there's no timer for it. And honestly, it was really cool to analyze these runs and see how these players, who are much better than Lucan and I are able to manage to pull these crazy things off. Now, of course, a huge thank you to Pedrogas and Wolfie, who both answered a ton of questions that we had on how they managed to do these runs. And if you're interested in speedrunning or just the community around Halo speedrunning, definitely check out their links in the description down below. Also, you can check out the website Halo Runs, which logs these leaderboards and is a really awesome community of people who speedrun all of the different types of Halo games. They have a really good speedrun wiki, which actually has some good guides on how to do runs, so make sure you guys check that out. But if you guys want to see more videos like this, or you have recommendations of other games you'd like to see us cover speedruns on, please let us know in the comments down below, or tweet to us at Rocket Elijah for me, or at Rocket Sloth Luke for Luke, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye guys.